Hello and welcome to everyone here and the people joining on Zoom. I'm Janice, this is Laura, and we will be co-chairing tonight's branch meeting.
Thank you.
So you know the drill. For our discussions, the Workers' World Party participates practices progressive stat, prioritizing comments from people of color, women, queer, transgender, non-conforming, people with disabilities, young people, and those who have not yet spoken. But before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the 77th anniversary of the Nakba that was officially last Friday, where over 700,000 Palestinians were violently ripped from their homeland in 1948 for the establishment of a terrorist state. Right now, if everyone's able to, I would like to have a moment of silence for the tens of thousands of Palestinians who had lost their lives on that day, and the hundreds of thousands who were slaughtered at the hands of imperialism since. Thank you.
Okay, our first speaker of the night is Workers' World Managing Editor Monica Moorhead on the Ballot or the Bullet and why revolutionary Marxists should defend the Voting Rights Act. Yay, Monica. Woo! Welcome.
Good evening, comrades and friends. Repeat the question that Laura just put out. Why is it important for Marxist-Leninists, revolutionaries, for activists to defend the right of oppressed people to vote?
Right.
This is an important question in the aftermath of the reactionary 6-3 vote from the U.S. Supreme Court, or SCOTUS, on a significant component of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that declared restricting or gerrymandering to assist in gaining more political representation for Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities was quote unquote unconstitutional. I wrote an article on the SCOTUS decision, which was posted a few weeks ago on workers.org, which appears in the new issue of WW. Okay. I just want to summarize some historical and political points made in the article within the context of form versus content. The main objective of this SCOTUS vote, first and foremost, is to strengthen white supremacy. What do I mean? This vote cannot be viewed in isolation, just as the Akasa flood on October 7, 2023, cannot be isolated from the 1948 Nakba. The SCOTUS vote is tied to significant historical factors that cannot be disputed. Following the period of enslavement, where Black people were legally treated as chattel and less than human, the Civil War, which was a struggle between two social systems, slaveocracy and capitalism, gave birth to Reconstruction, roughly a 10-year period where 4 million freed Black people were demanding full democratic rights that whites generally had. That meant the right to land that they toiled on to make the slaveocracy wealthy, the right to education, the right to political representation, with the right to vote. For the first time under Union Army protection, there were state legislatures in the South dominated by Black men. We should remember that women in general were not granted the right to vote until the 20th century. And for women of color, it was beyond, that period. These were rights not won overnight and would have taken more than a decade to fully protect. But once Republican and Democratic congressional representatives signed the Compromise of 1877, a concession to the former enslavers, What little rights were achieved were violently overturned with the burnings of Black schools, churches, lynchings by the thousands by the Klan, and confiscation of lands. Fascism became the unspoken law of the land in the South, forcing many Black people to migrate to the North. And SCOTUS, which legalized enslavement when the US Constitution was signed in the late 1700s, legalized segregation during the early 20th century, which led to Jim Crow laws in the South. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s was another attempt to complete the unfinished revolution that Reconstruction began almost a century later, to finally win these basic rights under a so-called bourgeois democracy. But this movement, while the form was in the framework of hoping to reform white-dominated capitalist electoral politics, it was nevertheless a progressive mass formation representing the aspirations of millions of disenfranchised, oppressed people. Black activists and their white supporters put their lives on the line, facing every kind of state and extra-legal terrorism with the complicity of the federal government. So for our party, the basis of our solidarity with this movement was not based on an ideological agreement with the reformist stance and a reliance on the federal government to make legal compromises. But objectively, our party extended its solidarity with the Black masses, including their leaders, who were targeted by COINTELPRO in an effort to finally achieve long overdue democratic rights denied to them by all white supremacist forces in the North and the South. Our party viewed the civil rights movement as the moderate wing of the overall Black liberation struggle. There was also a militant revolutionary wing of this struggle, which was also anti-imperialist. And leading this wing was the Black Power movement, led by then Stokely Carmichael, AKA Kwame Ture, and H. Rap Brown, AKA Iman Jamil Alamin. During the mid-1960s, along with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Republic of New Africa, Deacons of Self-Defense, Black Liberation Army, and of course, the Black Panther Party. Our political affinity was much more closer to this militant wing of the movement. And this wing was inspired by the teachings of Malcolm X, who popularized the right to self-defense against white supremacy for Black people, not just in the United States, but on a global scale. Before his assassination and more so after his assassination, revolutionaries throughout the world came to admire him due to his internationalism against capitalism and imperialism. You can see the quote right here from him. You can't have capitalism without racism. And many other forces around the world also really idolized Malcolm X and admired him because of his stance. Iran held a conference paying tribute to him back in 2013 and issued the first postage stamp honoring him anywhere in the world. It was Iran who did that first. On the occasion of the 101st anniversary of his birthday, this past May 19th, I want to share with you a few sections from one of his most famous speeches entitled "The Ballot or the Bullet," that he gave on April 3rd, 1964 in Cleveland, Ohio, to a majority Black audience. And I believe that much of his speech is so timely for today. He doesn't denounce Black people fighting for the right to vote, but does explain the hypocrisy and the limitations of the vote, under the capitalist US. And keep in mind, as I'm quoting from Malcolm, that this was 62 years ago. So some of the language he uses reflects that time, although I changed a little bit of it. Plus, this talk was given months before his historic trip to Mecca and his international worldview of the global struggle was evolving at that time. So here are some of his words. And keep in mind that he was speaking to a Black audience, having a dialogue with them. Quote, being here in America doesn't make you an American. Being born in America doesn't make you an American. Why, if birth made you American, you wouldn't need legislation. You wouldn't need amendments to the Constitution. You wouldn't be faced with civil rights filibustering in Washington, D.C. right now. They don't have to pass civil rights legislation to make a Polish person an American. No, I am not an American. I'm one of the 22 million Black people who are the victims of Americanism. One of the 22 million Black people who are the victims of democracy. Nothing but disguised hypocrisy. I'm speaking as a victim of this American system. And I see America through the eyes of the victim. I don't see an American dream. I see an American nightmare. In this present administration, they have in the House of Representatives 257 Democrats to only 177 Republicans. They control 2/3 of the House vote. Why can't they pass something that will help you and me? In the Senate, there are 67 senators who are of the Democratic Party. Only 33 of them are Republicans. Why? The Democrats have got the government sewed up, and you're the one who sewed it up for them. And what have they given for you for that? 4 years in office and just now getting around to some civil rights legislation. Just now, after everything is gone out of the way, they're going to sit down now and play with you all summer long. The same old giant con game that they call filibuster. All those in cahoots together. Don't you ever think that they're not in cahoots together? For the man that is heading the civil rights filibuster is a person from Georgia named Richard Russell. He continues. I was in Washington, D.C. when they were debating whether or not they should let the bill, this is the civil rights bill that was passed in 65, come onto the floor. And in the back of the room where the Senate meets, there's a huge map of the United States. And on that map, it shows the location of Black people throughout the country. And it shows the southern section of the country, the states that are most heavily concentrated with Black people are the ones that have senators and congressmen standing up filibustering and doing all kinds of chicanery to keep Black people from being able to vote. And lastly, from Malcolm, quote, if the Black man in these southern states had his full voting rights, the key Dixiecrats in Washington, D.C., which means the key Democrats in Washington, D.C., would lose their seats. The Democratic Party would lose its power. It would cease to be powerful as a party. When you see the amount of power that would be lost by the Democratic Party if it were to lose to the Dixiecrat wing or branch or element, you can see where it's against the interests of the Democrats to give voting rights to Black people. In states where the Democrats have been in complete power and authority ever since the Civil War, you just can't belong to that party without analyzing it. In the North, they do it a different way. They have a system known as gerrymandering. It means that Black people become too heavily concentrated in a certain area and begin to gain too much political power. The white man comes along and changes the district lines. You may say, why do they keep saying white man? Because it's the white man who does it. I have never, ever seen a Black person changing any lines. They don't let him get near the line. It's the white man who does this. And usually it's the white man who grins at you the most and pats you on the back and is supposed to be your friend. He may be friendly, but he is not your friend, end quote. Even several decades later, it is as if Malcolm X was speaking to us today on the significance of the SCOTUS vote. Stealing from the Black community even any modest gains resulting in any federal funding, with racist gerrymandering or with false claims of quote unquote reverse racism on behalf of reinforcing white supremacy with these white majority districts, the redrawing of the maps. So yes, we agree with Malcolm X on this form of the struggle being regressive because it takes place within the confines of the bourgeois elections where capitalist rule remains dominant. Nothing changes. But in essence, it does take away the recognizing that this is a mass struggle of the most oppressed who are marginalized because of who they are as an oppressed nation, having their basic democratic rights being snatched away from them. This is what Marxists mean by supporting self-determination for oppressed peoples, whether their choice be assimilation or separation or some kind of federation. And supporting this right to self-determination does not contradict the fact that we fight for socialism. Comrades and friends, bourgeois democratic rights for nationally oppressed peoples cannot be fully won, especially during this current period of the decline of US imperialism that is more dependent on white supremacy than ever before. That ship has sailed since the demise of Reconstruction. This is why we say class oppression is primary, but national oppression is not secondary. Due to the multinational character of the US working class, facing all forms of oppression and inequality. So with this understanding, it is even more important that as revolutionaries, we must be obligated to show class solidarity with those who have been historically and politically denied these rights due to settler colonialism, racism, xenophobia, and imperialism. If we fail in understanding this solidarity, both politically and practically, what hope is there to build and strengthen class unity towards a socialist revolution where only full equality, politically and economically, can be won? A socialist revolution is the only path where the goals and aims that Reconstruction heroically began can finally be completed. Long live the spirit of Malcolm X. Long live internationalism and working class solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Next, we'll hear from WWP First Secretary Larry Holmes speaking on U.S. failures in West Asia and what it means to support the resistance. But before that, first we'll be playing a few short clips, the first coming from CNN, which comes from a long article where the New York Times confirmed a new reality of previously uncontested U.S. domination in West Asia and the power of Iranian resistance.
Camp Buehring, Kuwait. American soldiers enjoying a karaoke night at one of the biggest U.S. military hubs in the Gulf. That was then. This is now. A once bustling American microcity in the desert, nearly empty and heavily damaged after a weeks-long barrage of Iranian missiles and drones. One of many U.S. military facilities in the oil-rich Arabian Peninsula, targeted by Iran even as the U.S. and Israel pummeled the Islamic Republic's large arsenal. So what impact have Iran's strikes had on America's footprint in the Middle East? A CNN investigation found evidence of unprecedented destruction. We can reveal that strikes damaged at least 16 U.S. installations across 8 countries. According to our analysis and sourcing, that's the majority of American military positions in the region, and some of them are virtually unusable now. A U.S. source familiar with the situation told us that they'd never seen anything like this at American bases, that these were rapid, targeted strikes using advanced technology. Iran's main targets? Multi-million-dollar aircraft, like this Boeing E-3 Sentry, which gave the U.S. a huge amount of visibility over the Gulf. It's out of production, and in today's money, it's worth nearly $500 million. Critical communications equipment. Look at these giant golf balls. They're known as radomes, and they protect satellite dishes vital for data transmission. In this base alone, Iran destroyed all but one of the radomes less than a month into the war. And crucially, radar systems. Highly sophisticated, expensive, difficult to replace, and critical to air defense. A second U.S. source, this one a congressional aide familiar with damage assessments, described these as the most cost-effective of the targets. Our radar systems, they said, are our most expensive and our most limited resource in the region. For U.S. allies in the region, there's a dilemma. In some ways, Iran's show of force makes the U.S.'s presence in the region even more necessary to Gulf security. But there's a new reality here, which is that U.S. military installations, previously seen as formidable fortresses, have turned into sitting targets. As a Saudi source told me, the war has shown Saudi Arabia, that's the U.S.'s longest-standing Arab ally, that the alliance with the U.S. cannot be exclusive, and it is not, in their words, impregnable. To get a sense of just how vulnerable U.S. facilities have become, have a look at this. It's the war room at Qatar's El Udeid Air Base, the theater command and control hub for U.S. air power across 21 nations. Struck not just once, but twice, and according to a U.S. source, causing significant damage. The base had been largely evacuated at this point, and no casualties were reported. Iran's visibility over its targets has never been clearer. In 2024, according to the Financial Times, Tehran secretly acquired a Chinese satellite, known as the TEE-01B, a massive upgrade from its own satellites. That means that Tehran went from looking at images of this quality to this. This is the first time America has fought an adversary with satellites that capture high-res imagery almost as detailed as its own. As the scale of the damage comes into focus, many will wonder whether America's presence, once a protective shield in the Middle East, has turned into its Achilles heel. Tamara Khablawi, CNN, London.
All right, that's it?
We have the next video.
Oh yeah, wait. The next video is titled, China quietly built a 10,400 kilometer railway to Iran and the US is terrified.
On May 25, 2025, China sent 32 containers of cargo to Iran, 10,400 kilometers away, not on a ship, not through any ocean, on a freight train that rolled through scorching deserts, cut across mountain ranges, passed through 4 separate countries, and arrived in just 15 days. The same journey by sea takes up to 40 days. That is not just an engineering achievement, that is a statement. For years, America's most powerful weapon against countries like Iran had nothing to do with missiles or soldiers. It was economic strangulation. Block a country's oil sales, freeze its bank accounts, cut it off from global markets, and watch it slowly run out of options. That strategy works because America controls the ocean. And if you need to move something in large quantities, you almost always have to use those waters. For Iran, every attempt to break free from that grip got pushed back, until a freight train quietly proved that you do not need the ocean at all. China built a route that runs entirely over land, through territory no Western Navy can patrol, arriving in Iran without a single dollar changing hands. The economic fence that took decades to build just had a massive hole punched through it, and that hole is only getting bigger. By the end of this video, you will understand how this railway was built, what it means for Iran's economy, and what China is really planning beyond this single route. there is a 5-nation expansion plan already moving forward, a frozen Arctic route being developed in parallel, and a long-term strategy designed to shift global trade away from Western control. The railway is just the opening move, and if you want
That's it. That's it.
And now here is First Secretary Larry Holmes.
Good evening, comrades. Can folks hear me? Great.
A little closer.
All right. I wrote with the help of Comrade Monica, actually it's based on some comments I made recently, a piece on Iran. I believe it's in the paper and it's online. And it is a reiteration of our position, which is a full unconditional support for Iran and in its defense against U.S.-Israeli war. And that unconditional also means uncritical, certainly publicly. And we know that with the contradictory nature of the Iranian government, there are questions that many good activists have, and in part, what I wrote was to briefly respond to some of that. But we welcome continuing discussion on this. We are bombarded by imperialist propaganda and prejudice to justify war. And so it comes as no surprise that even amongst very militant activists, anti-imperialist activists, that there might be questions. And so we welcome that. And please, especially if you're one who has questions or know other activists who have questions, let us know about it, because in letting us know about it, then we know that we must have more discussions about it. We have them internally, but we also have them publicly. I'm going to talk about Cuba briefly. As most of you know, I suspect, recently the U.S. government issued an arrest warrant for Raul Castro, one of the leaders of the Cuban Revolution and the former head of the Cuban government, based on something that happened 30 years ago, shooting down a spy plane or something like that. I think also at the same time, there was some legal action demanding that wealth or property that was liberated from sections of the Cuban bourgeoisie during the revolution be given back. And of course, there's been a military blockade, a sea blockade, ever since the attack on Venezuela. And, more ships have been sent, including the USS Nimitz, which is the second biggest US warship. So this is very, very dangerous, whether it's meant to pressure the Cuban government and people, or whether it's preparations for further military action, is a question for speculation. We know that, well, some of this is just speculation too, could be based on the fact that Trump and US imperialism is trying to compensate for the humiliation of their defeat in Iran. Maybe it's part of a long-term plan. We know that our comrades in Cuba, in the government, the mass organizations, and the military, they're very strong, they're very solid, they're very savvy, and they will defend their country. And Cuba's not isolated. It has support from China and other countries that are vital, decisive at the moment. I know there are meetings, emergency meetings going on amongst pro-Cuban activists, and this is a good thing. And I hope, I expect that these meetings will come up with plans for mass activity all over the country, which we are eager. The party, Workers' World Party, is eager to join, to help initiate, because this is what you do in a crisis like that. It is bad, problematic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to just sit on our hands at a time like this. And so I look forward to that. And perhaps very soon, we will organize an important meeting around this right here in this very room. There are meetings being organized, but there's no reason why, we should lend our modest office to such a meeting for the purposes of organizing this mass activity. Comrades, it's important that we understand this has always been the case, but it's even more important right now. The context of the attacks against Cuba. This is not just an attempt to crush the revolution. This is against China. It's against the whole world. Actually, it's an attempt by US imperialism to stop what is happening in the world. And what is that? The world has entered a very distinct phase, a phase that should be differentiated from even a few years ago, certainly a decade ago. That's why it's important to understand it. And that phase is a transformation to a post-US imperialist dominated, post-capitalist, at least, post-capitalist world. This is a transformation that will be uneven. We are not in the business of predicting timelines, but it is definitely in full motion. The defeat of the US by Iran is a turning point in this. This will not be a peaceful transformation, comrades. This is going to be violent. It's going to be tumultuous. It's going to involve war. It's going to involve economic and social dislocation and suffering for the working class that we usually associate with war and economic depressions. You could call it the birth pangs of a new world. But it will also include rebellions. It will include the radicalization of millions of workers, hundreds of millions of workers, It will include regimes, reactionary regimes falling. And as much as we tend to focus, it's completely understandable, on the events and the actions that we see and respond to right now. We have to do this. We must also be historically and world-oriented revolutionaries, comrades. And that's why it's important that we discuss what I'm raising, however briefly and perhaps inadequately. Theory and ideology are what we're going to need. Revolutionary theory and ideology are what we're going to need to survive as a political tendency, not just ourselves, but also those wherever they are, but especially here in the US, who are struggling to be a revolutionary core with gravity, meaning that we attract others. I think it's important time to time, and now is such a time, to remember that the many setbacks that in part have set the stage for long periods of reaction in this country, have had a negative consequence on revolutionary theory and ideology in large sections of the movement amongst activists. This is what happens when there are no or very few or successful revolutions, when there's not a revolutionary period. In the place of revolutionary theory develops all sorts of other theories. That's understandable, including I'm thinking about how to characterize a kind of Leninist light, which is good for activists. It's militant, and the premise is solidarity with the oppressed who are fighting around the world. And what's more important than that? But it lacks historical materialism, dialectical materialism. Not completely. It's lacking in that. And what I mean by that, the understanding of changes in the world, in the economy, in the world situation, in the means of production, technology, however, that can be analyzed on any number of levels. It doesn't, our analysis doesn't account for all that, which changes everything. Nothing is static. Everything is constantly changing, which is why the world situation today is different than it was 5 years ago. That's revolutionary Leninism. So we must fight to bring that back. Of course, the workers, rising up and getting involved in the class struggle, with more advanced forces having influence, if not leadership, such as ourselves, but also others, is important. But we can't reconstitute a revolutionary pole at the center of world imperialism unless, in addition to what we must do tomorrow, and that's usually what's on people's mind, rightly so, we have this other perspective of understanding what's happening in the world. There's an axiom of Marxism: being determines consciousness. And that axiom explains why we, to an extent, why we react to what's going on now. And that's inevitable, and that's correct. but in a way as revolutionaries, to be strong revolutionaries that influence others. We also have to, how should one put it, defy the gravity of being determines consciousness. Have part of our mind, part of our discussion focused on what is happening, the bigger picture, you know. So comrades, you know, in conclusion, you know, we are not alone in this process. There are many revolutionaries. There are many revolutionaries who are struggling with this. If that were not the case, we and others, well, the fear is that we'd be overwhelmed and pushed aside, would not be effective, maybe even would not exist. But, you know, we'll resist that, especially if we understand some of what I'm explaining. But we won't be alone. Conditions are going to create millions of revolutionaries. And our work will help that process. It won't, whether it'll be decisive, that's another question, but it'll be an integral part of it. Without it, it won't happen. And so, thank you, Collins.
Thank you so much, Larry. And now we will have Jen reading a statement on the current state of Cuba. Yay, Jen. Thank you.
Raul Castro Ruz is a revolutionary hero. U.S. hands off Cuba. On May 20, U.S. government prosecutors indicted Raul Modesto Castro Ruz, a lifelong Cuban revolutionary and former president of Cuba, for murder. The charges stem from the 1996 shooting down of 2 planes operated by a counter-revolutionary terrorist group, the Miami-based Brothers to the Rescue. 4 people died in the downing of the planes, which the U.S. Justice Department claims was ordered by Raul Castro, who will be 95 years old on June 3rd. Workers' World rejects this effort to characterize Raul as a murderer. We regard him as a true revolutionary hero. Raul was with his brother Fidel Alejandro Castro Ruz when the July 26 movement attacked the Moncada barracks in 1953. This attack, regarded as the beginning of the Cuban Revolution, was brutally crushed, and Fidel, Raul, and others were sent to prison by the US-backed repressive dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista. After being released from prison in 1955, Fidel and Raul joined others, including Che Guevara, on the yacht Granma, which sailed from Mexico to Cuba in 1956. Those who survived the assault by Batista's forces, including Fidel, Raul, and Che, formed the guerrilla army of the revolution, which triumphed on January 1st, 1959. After the triumph of the Cuban Revolution, Raul held the important position of Minister of the Armed Forces from 1959 to 2008. In 2006, as Fidel was ailing, Raul became president of Cuba, in which office he served the revolution until 2018. He was first secretary of the Communist Party of Cuba from 2011 to 2021. Although he retired from those positions, which are now held by Miguel Mario Diaz-Canel Bermudez, he retains the title of Army General. We agree with the Cuban government that the U.S. charges against Raul represent a despicable and infamous act of political provocation and a pretext for a U.S. invasion of the island of 11 million people. As the revolutionary government points out, Cuba had issued a number of formal complaints to the U.S. government about the intrusions into its airspace by Brothers to the Rescue. We salute the Cuban Revolution in the year of the centenary of the birth of Fidel, who was born August 13, 2026. And we are in solidarity with its statement that the Cuban people reaffirm their unwavering decision to defend the homeland and its socialist revolution, and with the greatest strength and firmness, their unrestricted and unchanging support for Army General Raul Castro Ruz, leader of the Cuban Revolution. Long live Raul Castro Ruz. Hands off Cuba.
Thank you, Jen. So our last speaker is Haley, who is the reason that the Zoom doesn't descend into chaos. And they will be speaking on the May Day event on May 1st. But before that, here's a clip of the demonstration.
Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Not another nickel! Not another dime! Not another dime! Not another dime! No more money! No more money! For Israel's crime! For Israel's crime! Not another nickel!
It's a good thing that labor unions have finally embraced May Day. You know, some of us are old enough to remember when they didn't like May Day because it was associated with revolution and socialism and communism and the working class. So it's a good thing. But we're here to address one of the weaknesses, especially on May Day, International Workers' Day. We can't just be about the demands of workers here. Of course we have to. For jobs, for cheaper gas, free gas, for housing, for everything that they need, everything that we got less of day after day. But May Day is about the workers of the world.
That's right, it is!
Geography don't matter. Language always matters, but it matters less today. Because we are united on a global level, and there's a global revolution against U.S. imperialism, and that's a good thing. God damn it, that's a good thing. And it's growing. And the Iranian people are leading the way right now in that rebellion, but there are people on every continent, especially in the global south, who are playing their role. And so our message to everyone on May Day, as we say, it's about workers here, workers in New York, workers in every part of this country, but it's also about workers in Iran. It's also about the workers in Palestine and in Lebanon and in Gaza and in Venezuela and in Cuba and every place that U.S. imperialism is targeting with bombs and war and starvation in a desperate effort to hold on to their empire, which is crumbling. So, long live Palestine! Long live Iran! Long live solidarity! Long live revolution! Workers of the world unite! Workers of the world unite!
Come up here, Haley.
Hello from in front of the camera this time, to everyone here and on Zoom. Though we're now at the end of May, I want to just take a moment to look back at the very start of the month, which is, of course, May Day, a day for honoring the international working class, and a day which has no official recognition here in the United States. Last year, we had a very successful rally along the route of the May Day March, which is held by several unions, the New York City Central Labor Council, and other New York City orgs who can at times be resistant to platforming important aspects of the struggle. This year, we stood along the route of the march again, and were again able to have a very meaningful exchange with the workers there. We stood along the march with signs and chants for Palestine, Iran, Cuba, and Venezuela. And many of those marching joined in with us as they passed. I have to say that I particularly enjoy this event because it tends to be very joyful, and it's encouraging to see so many people joining together in solidarity on issues that bourgeois media would have people think the average worker does not support. But the truth is that people do care about these issues and stand against the international oppression of their class. And this year, notably more workers within the march itself brought these issues to the table. Many of the signs the workers had brought to the march called out ICE and called for support for Palestine and Venezuela and Iran and Cuba. This is an important shift that's not unique to New York City. This year, May Day was prominent throughout the country. And at many demonstrations, workers were bringing these issues together as their concerns, and more specifically, their concerns as workers. May Day was founded to honor the international working class, but the date was selected specifically to honor a moment of radical defense of workers' rights here during a strike in the United States. And workers here were intentionally severed from that history. The renewed interest in observing May Day here is a sign that the workers are ready and willing to join in the struggle, not just as workers, but as members of the international working class. And we will be there to support them as they put those pieces together. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. So we are about to enter our discussion, but before we open the floor, we have a few announcements, starting with the latest issue of our newspaper, which Janice is holding up for everyone to see and be amazed by. So our party provides a monthly print issue of our paper at our meetings, rallies, and marches to provide our independent revolutionary news and analysis from the lies and distortions of the corporate-dominated media. 1/3 of our readers are incarcerated workers who receive free copies. Our paper has consistently sided with the workers and oppressed in struggles, large and small, against the billionaire ruling class and its monstrous repressive apparatus of all forms, i.e. the military, since our first issue dated in 1959. This new issue contains a Nakba Day national roundup, a hands-off Cuba editorial, economic news including the struggle against AI, Iran, and the global struggle, and more. If you want to help us get out class truth to our class with a pro-socialist, anti-capitalist, and anti-imperialist perspective, we encourage you to take 5 to 10 copies with you tonight to give to your coworkers and friends. Monica will provide those copies after the meeting. This issue will be handed out at Pride events around the country next month. The June 25th print issue will be distributed at Pride here on the last Sunday of next month. The end. Now, if I could get people's hands for stack. Whoever is inclined. Is there anyone on Zoom? Oh, okay. Che, come on up here.
Oh, and oh, wait.
Sure.
Hi everyone, I'm Che. Just wanted to say that I appreciate Larry's remarks earlier because I do think it's really important for the party to unconditionally support Iran and Venezuela and Cuba and really any nation that is resisting imperialism, and not only nations, but also organized people's resistance like Hezbollah, like Ansar Allah, and any other self-organized people's resistance to US imperialism. And yeah, and I think it's a really rare position to have nowadays. So that's why I do think that, Workers' World is like very, very principled in that regard by just holding the line when it's difficult to do so. And right now, it's not a popular time to even um, support Iran's resistance, the IRGC. And, it's important that we just hold the line and, not drift towards liberalism on issues of anti-imperialism, just because as a reminder, the primary contradiction that we face as people living inside the empire is imperialism. And whenever we analyze a nation, we always have to remember the context. And the context, for example, with Iran and with Venezuela, with Cuba, the context is that they've been subjected to decades of sanctions, lawfare, regime change operations, covert and overt operations, and just basically every form of oppression that you can think of. These nations have been fighting that for decades. So when we look at these nations, we always have to put that front and center, and not just look at any internal contradiction in these nations as if they exist in a vacuum. Like, we have to understand that the stage of development that these nations are in right now is under US sanctions. So just always remember that when you hear any type of criticism against these nations. And then also the other thing to keep in mind, and this is a reminder, that our role in the belly of the beast in the empire is fundamentally different than that of people in Venezuela and in Iran that are resisting imperialism right now. Like, over there, like, they have a right to levy criticism because they're doing that in service of defending their revolution. And that's not our role. Our role is to help them defend their revolution. So before you ever levy any criticism, ask yourself, is this helping defend the revolution, or is this hurting the defense of that revolution? Because that is our number one priority. The last thing I want to mention too is that because Workers' World has such a good political line on anti-imperialism, Comrade Sarah spoke at our Poly Ed for Bronx Anti-War, Bronx Mutual Aid. Was it last week? And then Monica speaking next week on the topic of Black liberation, Pan-Africanism, and the struggle to free our comrades, the duty to free our comrades. So just wanted to say that we respect the party line so much, and we need to stay firm. Do not drift to liberalism, including everybody that's listening on the phone right now and online, because we will hear people that self-identify as leftists and anti-imperialists. They'll say, "Oh, we have to point out these criticisms," and I'm like, "No, we don't. Why now? Why now? Why at a time when Iran and Venezuela and Cuba are literally fighting, resisting, and being models? They should be like our models and our heroes. They should be, because of their resistance. And now is not the time to levy those criticisms." Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so as a refresher for everybody in the room and everyone on Zoom, if you want to join STAC, just raise your hand and we'll add you to the list. Like Shahid just did. And Tony just did. And for those on Zoom, just comment STAC in the chat and we will pick you when Haley says we will pick you. All right, Shahid. Shahid?
Come on up. Yep.
Hello.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Shahid Comrade, and peace and love for you. Thank you very much from the stage people and all of you. You are very important people. My organization, which I'm a Secretary General, Pakistan USA Freedom Forum, admire your work, written words, spoken words. You spoke before, you're going to be speaking next week or next years, or somewhere. Thank you very much. We are living in this atmosphere, in this world at this moment, which has have more responsibility on us. We have seen the aggression. We have seen the invasions. For one reason, that might want to tell you that your brain is nothing. That's the failure of the US education system, that our brains are defeated. Who's challenging any organization in this country, like a Congress? My country, my army, United States Army, invaded Iran, kidnapped president of Venezuela, killing people in a boat in the international water. Is there any law? Is there any conscience to cry for that and giving a free hand to the wolf and heinous of Israel name from the day one? That's area, that's atmosphere we are living. So what's it asking us? We have to raise our voice. Yes, what Larry said, thank you, Larry, for your services. Sarah, Monica, people who spoke over here, just gentlemen told you that don't be fooled. Somebody come to you as a murderer, as an invader, and talking about the women's right in Afghanistan and in Iran, and bombing Iran, and creating the whole problem for everybody, not for present, in the future. This is the result, I think, failure of the Western education system, which is not force you to take a stand. Tell the world, it's a bullshit, we cannot afford it, stop it now. So with these words, my country at this moment is totally controlled by the CIA. General Asam Munir is illegal at this moment, Chief of Army Staff. Prime Minister, rigged elections is a result of the engineered elections. They not won, got only 2 seats and 3 seats, and now they're ruling the country. Our spy agency, ISI, totally controlled by the Pentagon. It's a shame for me. But what they're doing at this moment for the peace, yes, that's the basis and the message of my father of nation, Mr. Jinnah, 1876 born, and 1948 he died. There's a clear message that we will be always ready and helpful to promote the peace. Yes, they are illegal governments over there, but they're doing the job which we're supposed to do. Can I say nothing against them? Yes, I have a right to say against them. They are illegal, controlling my country, selling the future of my kids. I'm a proud Pakistani to stand against occupations. I'm a proud Pakistani, part of the world that we talk about, end the wars, end the occupations. And these capital society cannot make me more fool. We want to do something for you, for your future. Every one of you over there, you have energy. Thank you very much. Please talk to your other young students, people. We will bring the real honor of this country wherever we live. It's our job. Thank you, Haley, for your coming to the front of the camera. You're behind the camera. And before your elders who use this camera years and years, PVN. Thank you for them. I'm remembering the same way I elders, Dr. Marcy. Thank you very much. Peace is the future. Yes, we can make it. I wish I had more education and more money to serve you, but accept me. And thank you very much, Sarah, and leader of this. We will do our job. Peace, peace, and peace. But we will not go down against the kind of Trumpy and Netanyahu people. No way. No way. That's a shame for us. Thank you very much.
Going to be brief, as it usually is when I say something. I did want to mention the global sumo flotilla, which, okay. So I think it was 420 people, 28 people were abducted on the seas illegally because they had a right to be there, and they were taken and they were brutally attacked. There were several videos on Instagram showing them being bent over, the way in which Palestinians are forced to be on their hands and knees with their hands being handcuffed. Well, they were treating all of those people who went on that flotilla in the same way that they treat Palestinians. Not as brutally. I don't think they were beaten in the same way, but they were beaten. I mean, you could see, and yet this keeps happening. These flotillas happen, it seems like they begin every month, and yet people even my age are willing to risk their lives and go on these trips. I mean, it's, I think, incredible that they're willing to do that. And so I think it's important that even though there's so much else going on, with the war in Iran and in Lebanon, but there's still what's going on in Gaza. And these people are doing everything to break the siege. And, as I was walking here, I was listening to Bisan, she's a journalist in Gaza, talking about one of the things that's happening right now there is this incredible amount of rats. There are just rats everywhere. And so children who try to go to sleep in a tent are getting bitten by rats. And everybody knows what a health disaster it is for particularly young people to get bitten by rats. So they're facing the same conditions they've been facing for the last almost now 3 years. And I think I know we're thinking about so many other things, but we can't take our eyes off of that. This disaster is happening and we have to pay attention to it. Some of us here, go to the Nakba demonstration last Saturday, which it was very good. We had a fairly good presence there. And actually we got very well received we were the only organization there actually that had signs talking about victory to the resistance of Palestinians. But it was also well received. In fact, Bill was we brought an Iranian flag, and someone came up to him and thanked him that we had brought the flag with us. So that's it.
Okay. All right, Michael. Sunday. We're gonna speak together. Sunday and Emmy.
I'll grab the chair next to you.
Hello, everybody. So good to see everyone again. Yeah, I know we've been a little bit busy for the past few weeks, dealing with and working on a few events, and working, and, doing our normal programming. And I'm thankful for Workers World for being so understanding of our, more busy schedule, but hoping to be able to be more involved in the future. But with that being said, I wanted to talk a little bit more about our event that we had just the other day on May 19th at Queer Nightlife Community Center, which is right on the border of East New York and Brownsville, we hosted a trans healthcare event, which was more about making an event that both had portions of mutual aid, but also had a political discussion, which talked about the spiritual and material alignment of of the Black trans woman and what it means and what it looks like for us to control our own healthcare. It was a very fruitful discussion where we had many people outside of our organization, many Black trans women get involved and communicate with each other. We had a vigil where we'll talk about the vigil a little bit later, but we had an area for people to just do like some art therapy to get like more holistic means of health care as well when it comes to like acupuncture, Reiki, cuppings. We had medical checkups on standby. We had massages available for free, food and like water for the girls, as well as just areas for the girls to relax, play some chess, have some nice incense going on, get a little face mask on their face, a little nail cuticle moment. And we also had a vigil where people could also remember the loved and ones that were passed. And during the event, I'm just going to say this part about that, as during the event, we received news that we lost another sister right in Bushwick. Erica Caldwell, who's 41 years old, was fatally stabbed by an abusive boyfriend. So it was a moment for us to come together and remember her. So I'm going to hand it off to Iris to begin speaking a little bit more about that.
Hello. Yeah, it is with heavy heart that we are speaking about this. Just within the past week, we lost Erica Caldwell, as my comrade had mentioned, as well as Juniper Blessing. Both women were killed by transphobic violence, one by a partner, another on college campus. Juniper was stabbed over 40 times. She was just 19 years old. And so, the past week has been very difficult for us. But I think, like my comrade had said, it is very important that trans communities and communities that are under constant attack and oppression are able to heal themselves and grieve with this pain and keep up their revolutionary spirit. And so that's why the event that we had was so fruitful. Like my comrade had mentioned, we had a lot of different forms of healing. But as well as at the end, we talked about, trans healthcare, the history of transness in this world, because so many think that trans people are, a new phenomenon and something that just came out of the 1900s. But we know that people who have been fluid in their gender, different gender expressions have existed since the beginning of time. It's not a Western thought, it is human thought, human experience. And we connected the idea of transness and trans oppression to the rise of capitalism. And now also talking about, transgenders versus transsexuals, with surgeries and hormones and things like that, just making the connection and really bringing a spiritual healing aspect to it to show that it's more than just about getting surgery and about getting hormones, but it's about being with community and being loved and being cared for and ending this capitalist system. So I wrote a very brief statement finding out the news of the murder of Erica Caldwell. Within the past week, we have lost two sisters, Juniper Blessing and Erica Caldwell, to state-sanctioned violence, both brutally murdered by men, by this patriarchal capitalist system. As fascism rises, as capitalism reaches the ladder, we will continue to see violence against women and anyone who challenges the patriarchy increase. We know that a state forms a society within every nook and cranny, from politics to culture and so much more. So when a state is governed by pedophilic Zionist billionaires, we know what will be bred within. We cannot afford to accept defeat and continue to lose our siblings to this violent system. We must continue to organize our community and act by whatever means necessary to protect each other and arm each other with the tools to overthrow this capitalist state, whether that be physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, materially, or others. It is the only way we will achieve liberation for all of us. It is the only way we will see an end to this systematic erasure of all oppressed people, from Palestine to Sudan to Cuba to Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Queens.
And I would like to add like one more thing. You know, I've gone to many protests, many events, and this is just for like the greater leftist organization, not necessarily just for workers' role. When we see Black trans women, when we see women in general come to these events, to these protests, they are going to be the ones that are going to be most likely targeted by violence from the opposition, violence from Zionists, violence from whoever the fuck we're, you know, bothering for that day, the people who love America for some fucking reason, excuse my language, but I'm going to get a little emotional about this. So, you know, when it comes to Arm the Dolls, you know, my girls, my dolls, my friends, my siblings, we're going to stand up, right? We're going to be there on the front lines. We're going to be protecting one another. But when it comes to the men in our space, you know, especially the men in our space, what we expect from y'all is to be right there in front, right there with us. There should be no reason why I'm looking around left and right and I'm only seeing the girls protecting the girls, okay? There should be no reason that everybody's looking left and right while waving an Iranian flag, talking about glory to the resistance when the resistance is right in front of you. And, you know, okay, I'm gonna have a Trump moment right here. Can you say a few words about ATDZ for new people? People have. No, I'm just playing, y'all. But yeah, sure. So Arm the Dolls is a Marxist-Leninist organization. We fight for all oppressed people who live in the belly of the beast. You know, and we focus and center our work around the Black trans women, you know, led by Black trans women as well as others. But we also understand the racial and class struggles and how they intertwine even within the within the trans community. How easy it is, or easier, how much easier it is for a white trans woman to get access to hormones, work, anything else versus a Black trans woman. So our goal is to materially, physically, spiritually, and politically uplift trans women, especially Black trans women. Yeah, so yeah, that's Arm the Dolls. So just to let y'all know, like what Arm the Dolls means is like we are serious. Like we want to arm the dolls in all ways, like materially, physically, politically, you know, every other way. And we understand that you can't just give somebody one thing and not give them the other things, you know. Y'all can figure out what that means. But back to the point, because I think this is very serious, so I need to make it very clear when it comes to the space. You know, I've also heard about in some other tangential ways, people in our space have been violently or abusive to trans women in that space, and I do not tolerate that at all. You know, I find that as a form of abuse that is irreprehensible. How dare you come into our space and try to hurt another trans woman or a trans woman in our space? So like at this point, like my feelings on this situation is if I see somebody in our space who is violating our community members, I should be able to point them out and that person should get. All right. Well, at the end of the day, I thank you for letting me speak and I appreciate Workers' World and everything that y'all stand for. So thank you so much.
Good evening, comrades. I just wanted to expand a bit on Monica's report on Black voting rights that it's not just gerrymandering the Black community out of districts. It's even more insidious that state legislatures, particularly in the South, in the old Confederacy, where white supremacy so predominates, have another way of doing things, which is, for example, in Tennessee, Memphis, 70% Black. In Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, the state capital, I think over 85% Black. The state legislatures take the powers from the city, and they virtually take much of the power that the city has, that the mayor has, that the city council has, and remove it and put it into the state legislature. And really delegitimize and take away the sovereignty that people have. So this is something else we should be on the lookout. And thank you so much. Oh, yeah. Okay. So you can read about it in Workers' World newspaper. This issue had an opportunity to attend a demonstration in Newark, New Jersey, Bricktown. With organized by our wonderful allies in the People's Organization for Progress, whose chairperson, Lawrence Ham, is well known to us, and I think has even spoken in the past at activities we've organized. And it was a morning, 11 a.m., and well over 50 people showed up. With only a few days' notice, we had a picket line in front of the federal courthouse in downtown Newark, followed by a rally. And what was good was they called it United Front, but the coalition of organizations that came from, more traditional, the NAACP of Newark came. Unions came, 1199J, government workers who work in the federal courthouse sent representatives out to speak at the rally. There were religious organizations there, organizations from the Muslim community. So it really was very important. It got good press locally in Newark. And I could only encourage folks to cross that big river, Hudson River, and join some of the actions in Newark. Very spiritually uplifting, and great response from people passing by, cars honking, and things like that. So yeah, so that is my report on our latest activities on the other side of the Hudson River.
Have anyone else for STAC before Larry goes, because he is our closer.
I wanted to say just a word about Trump's visit to China. It was just this past week. And sort of how it connects with everything else that's happening right now in the world and this enormous actual escalation of US threats. Because Trump and this huge entourage of multi-billionaires and corporate CEOs arrived in China, and in the big reception in front of the media of the world, President Xi Jinping, in greeting him, also reminded him in these words that the US is now a nation in decline. Said it very politely, but to his face. Now, and by the way, Trump and the whole entourage, not one of them were allowed to have phones for the 3 days in China. And that wasn't China's rule. The US insisted everybody leave their phones They said for security reasons on the plane. But it really meant you weren't hearing from any of them during this time. Now, the US media gave this kind of incredible coverage because every single article described the visit as a failure. It's sort of amazing. Big headlines in the Times, ABC, you know, every one of the corporate media used these words about how the trip had backfired, hadn't gone the way they expected, how the setback in Iran was so huge that it couldn't be hidden, and it was a terrible time to go, and so on and so forth. Now, I raise all this because there was some commentators that said, well, maybe that coverage means the U.S. is finally facing reality. You know, they see they're no longer, President Xi told them to their face, they're a nation in decline. What conclusion did they draw from it? And it's US imperialism isn't like a rational, capitalism isn't a rational system. It's not capable of rational choices. It is a gigantic military, political establishment that exists for war. And that's how it makes its profits. And its 800 bases around the world and its dominance in the economy right here. And 18 intelligence agencies and 50 think tanks that all spend all their time planning for war. So they may think one thing, but the planners roll right ahead. And especially, they can't seem to figure out, as you saw from those videos, how to turn around the situation in Iran. Doesn't mean they won't try. Reckless as the first attack is, the next attack may well be more reckless. But in the meantime, all of their attention in the most horrific ways is focused on the Western Hemisphere. Now there's a general strike, tens of thousands of workers in the streets in Bolivia, demanding the government resign. And what did the US do in the midst of all this? They actually landed several helicopters to try to kidnap Evo Morales. And because he was surrounded by people, it didn't happen. So these are the kind of, along with grabbing Alex Saab, who's been totally pardoned and there were no charges of him. And now the threats on Cuba for an invasion, a bombing, or a seizure of Raul Castro. So the conclusion that they draw that you're in decline is absolutely more vicious. And it means we need to be aware and have no illusions that that they are more reasonable people faced with their own desperation. You know, a monster facing its demise doesn't become kinder and gentler. It really does not. And you can see that with the coverage this week, Venezuela, Bolivia, Cuba. Every one of these countries know they have a huge target suddenly on their back and an absolutely ruthless system. And we should know it for here too. So anyway, just for us to be really aware of this, at the same time, we should be aware just what it means for the US to lose every base in Western Asia. That's pretty incredible. And they have no way of rebuilding because they all exist within the Gulf region that now, you know, Iran controls the Straits of Hormuz. We could look at what's happening in Lebanon, where, I mean, Israel is really having it's facing sure defeat. They're being really rolled out. So there are all kinds of things happening, even in planning today's agenda, what to focus on, what to discuss, what it means. But our orientation is always to face the monster here, because there's a lot of frustration, particularly those who have dealt their whole lives and are in deep solidarity with the struggle in Latin America. And now, because they're fearful and apprehensive, are kind of venting in ways that that are off target. And I think the more that from Workers' World and everyone we're in touch with takes one line of support for every one of these countries, not telling them how and what they should do at any moment, but it is a case of holding the line.
Well, I agree completely with what Sarah just said, but I'm going to throw in a little something else to think about, because I was responsible as a managing editor. I was responsible for this print issue, and I was paying attention to just the things we've been talking about: Iran, the decline of U.S. imperialism, the threats against Cuba, even the working class struggle here in the United States with the railroad strike. But I noticed something. We had 3 articles in this issue that have to do with artificial intelligence. So it's like they all sort of came together at the same time. I get the feeling that a lot of people, even though they're not the people that we're directly in touch with and organizing right now, a lot of people are very concerned about this. Because we had one article about the environmental impact of the data centers, one article about layoffs and joblessness that might arise, and one article about a possible bursting of the investment bubble. And in looking for photographs to use with these articles, I discovered that at almost every commencement, graduation, where someone came in and spoke positively, or even partly positively, about artificial intelligence, all the students, not all the students, but a lot of students booed him, the ones who were graduating. And only reason I bring that up is just so that you put it as a little bug back in your mind, because every struggle that arises against this imperialist monster, from almost whatever sector of society, from this great working class it's both divided and we want to unite it. Whenever there's a potential struggle, we have to know, we have to have a position on it. And if it's possible to organize a struggle and get involved in it and recruit from the people who are in it, we should be able to do it. And that's just, I'm not saying this is what you should be thinking about as opposed to defending Cuba or stopping the war against Iran or stopping the genocide in Gaza. But I'm saying just it's something else to be part of the big class struggle that we hope will burst out here one of these days. The sooner the better.
Say again.
Sorry, I forgot to talk about what I initially came to talk about, which was Bronx Mutual Aid. In February, just really short, Bronx Anti-War, we launched Bronx Mutual Aid, and it was really a way to get our community to, honestly, the strategy is radicalize and politicize our community. So we decided to distribute free food, and that very quickly expanded to, we were distributing free produce, and that quickly expanded to hot food, clothes, toiletries, books, and now we do weekly activities for kids in the community. We have actually grown a little bit too fast. We're having anywhere between 200 to 300 members of the community come out every single Saturday. Yeah. It's a little bit scary though, because it's a lot of people. Because usually when it comes to volunteers, we'll have anywhere between 10 to 15 volunteers, which was easy to manage at the beginning phases, but now it's a lot of people. That being said, we are fundraising for some things that will help us deal with more people. Like we have to actually start building like line management infrastructure, because we're also having people lining up beginning at either as early as 9 a.m. So that's like literally 4 hours early for our mutual aid distribution every single week. And we have heard people coming from literally all different parts of the Bronx to come and attend this. So we need to get better with line management and crowd control. So we're literally trying to buy infrastructure. We're trying to buy those like things that you see at the airport, to help, and movie theaters to, what are they called? Yes, Stantons. And they're really expensive. So we are trying to do that, and it's really a way for us to keep everything like orderly. The other thing that we're fundraising for is a big canopy, not like the small ones when you at the little fair. Like we want to get like a big one that basically is the size of this room. And we want to fundraise for that, which is basically like $1,000. We're also fundraising for chairs. We may be taking some chairs from here at some point in the future, but we'll return them. Because we basically want to keep people there for longer, because people are showing up so early, they don't stay as long as we want them to, because they're like, I've been waiting here since 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. So we want people to like come, grab food, grab clothes, do activities for the kids, and then stay for the political education, because we're also doing political education at the event after the distro. So one way to do that is just to like create a space for people to rest. So we want to get tables, we want to get chairs, we want to get a huge canopy, and we basically want to like take over the entire park every single Saturday. Like that's our goal, that's our vision. And then eventually, since we're all comrades here, we want to mobilize those individuals to accomplish things that we have set out for ourselves in the Bronx. So that being said, if you are willing to spare $5, $10, actually, our average donation is, I think, $7.30 something cents. That's literally the average donation that we receive. And we have a website called givebutter.com/Bronx Mutual Aid, givebutter.com/Bronx Mutual Aid. Our average donation is $7, I think $7.20 something cents. Let's say 27 cents. If you can match that, right, we can eventually take over the Bronx. That's our goal. We want to take over the park and then take over the Bronx. And I think we can do it because we are bringing out hundreds of people every single week. And we just need to buy some infrastructure to manage the amount of people that are there, because the park, being a Bronx park, as we all know, is neglected, and there is not a lot of seating that's available in the park. There is like 3 benches that can fit like 10 people. That's not enough seating. So help us get tables, help us get stanchions, help us get a canopy, help us get chairs, and we're gonna try to build a poly ed series in the park every single Saturday going forward. So help us. Thank you so much.
All right, last but not least, here is Larry.
Just a comment on some of the great comments that were made. Artificial intelligence, which in a general way, from Marxist perspective, we would consider the latest digital technological revolution. It will foment revolution. There's no doubt about it, because at this stage of the evolution of capitalism, and we argue that it's, in its end phase, even its final phase, that's a protracted thing, that this technological revolution is not just an attack on the working class, it threatens the very existence of larger and larger sections of the working class. These students know that. And that is why, especially as the multi-crisis tsunami that is integral to the global crisis that is developing, whether it's a financial collapse or because of oil, this is what's going to revolutionize a lot of people. It's also part of another part of society which heretofore thought that an education meant that it would have a good life, and are realizing that in reality they're being pushed into the proletariat. And that may not revolutionize all of them, but it revolutionizes enough of them. So it's going to be a factor. I appreciate On the Dolls for many, many reasons. One of them is this. Their existence and their struggle is evidence, living evidence that the trans question, the trans struggle is not merely progressive, which of course it is. And there's a lot of petty bourgeois and bourgeois forces that, are for that, regardless of what they do or don't do in reality, in defense of trans people. That at its core, it is a revolutionary struggle for the liberation of humankind. And it's worldwide, and it's consistent with the worldwide struggle for socialist revolution. And that is its proper place. And it is that understanding that it should be elevated to. And it is formations like On the Dolls that they exemplify that, just to underscore one of maybe the central point that I made in my earlier comments is theory and analysis, theory and ideology, revolutionary theory and ideology are not just for understanding the past. And I think that a lot of times that's how it's used. And that's great. That's terrific. But living revolutionary theory and ideology is for analyzing the present and the future. That's why, all the questions that were raised tonight, sort of are coming to that territory in a way. With that in mind, the assertion I made, the idea I presented was that the rapidly changing world situation, I think I characterize it as a transformation involving, moving from a post-US imperialist dominated world, a semi-post capitalist world, to something else. That something else is worldwide socialist revolution, however uneven, however protracted. That's the assertion to be, if it's deemed significant enough, to be studied, to be analyzed, to be rebutted, or argued, which is, is absolutely correct. But just to restate, the world situation, based on the events that we're discussing, China's a big part of it. The rise and power and impact of China, particularly on the global south, and in the struggle against US imperialist hegemony, but also the examples, it was the article in the paper about the view, China's view of AI, or probably it will be one of the articles coming up. I saw something on the chat, they don't think it should be anti-working class. They think this revolutionary technology should be used to uplift the most oppressed. It's the enemy of the working class under class society, under capitalism. So I just wanted to underscore that assertion, and a final word about our world perspective. It's not just because we're nice people who want the best for the world, and we feel viscerally the oppression of the people of the world, be they in West Asia or Africa or South America or whatever. Of course, that's part of it, because we're human, and we're even more human than most because our consciousness is at a global level. But it's based on materialism. It's based on revolutionary theory. We talk in terms of world revolution. That does not mean that we're not aware that our job here is to foment revolution here, is to organize and push forward the working class here, and that will be both separate and connected to the world struggle. And that will involve all of the issues that you all know about in this city, in other cities, in other oppressed communities, the struggle that Monica talked about. It involves all of that. But our job as revolutionaries, especially located here at the center of world imperialism, is to fight for a world revolutionary perspective. It shouldn't be the case, especially now, and it won't be the case. It will be less and less the case that the rest of the world is rejoicing over what Iran has done. And yet there's confusion about it to some extent here. And let's just say for a moment what that's about. It's about imperialism. What is the biggest pillar, one could argue, of imperialism? It's that, well, if you want to go, depending on how deep you want to get into this, they've used some of their wealth to buy off sections of the masses, including the working class. That's changing. We're not, we don't hold the working class responsible for that, some guilt kind of way. We think that the white supremacists should either retreat, be defeated, be converted, or just disappear. But those sections of the working class that are capable of evolving, that are moving in a different direction, we're dedicated to that. That's part of the class struggle. But we must hammer away at this wall that separates the working class in this country from the world struggle, particularly of oppressed people, but of the entire working class. We must hammer away at that. That's reactionary, and it's an obstacle. We are optimistic about breaking down that obstacle. It's happening. The global South exists here. Look at the character of the working class. But that's so important. That's why we embrace the Palestinians, the Iranians, the Africans, the Cubans, the Venezuelans, everybody. That's why we embrace them. We are, to the extent that we can be, part of their voice at the center of imperialism. Without revolutionaries like us, who will speak for them? Who will explain their struggle? Who will support it? That's not just a feel-good type thing. That's a obligation, a necessity of the revolutionary struggle for world socialism. Anyway, let me be quiet.
Thank you, Larry. Great discussion all around. Before we totally close up and go home, I do want to touch on everyone's favorite topic, Workers' World's funds. If you are willing, if you are able, we would really appreciate donations to Workers' World. The Venmo at Workers' World is on the screen, and you can also go to workers.org/donate. I don't know if people have noticed that every other org's newspapers cost something when you're at protests and at rallies, and I think it's really awesome that Workers' World gives out our newspaper for free, and especially that we send it to incarcerated workers as well. So for us to continue to be able to do that, to continue to organize effectively, if you can donate, that would be amazing. Thank you.
And if you're in the room, you will notice that Marcia is coming around with a bowl.
Oh yeah, if you have cold hard cash, there's also a bowl.
Okay, so thank you everybody for attending in person and the 18 people who attended on Zoom. And that concludes our meeting for tonight.